Okay, let's see who participants. So there they are. Might as well start with the introduction. While I do the introduction, I'm sure some others will join as well. So good morning to you all. First of all, my best wishes for the new year, as per tradition. So this is the first Checkmates Live Belux of the year, and we're kicking off with an update session on Maestro. For that, we have our very own Tom Kendrick calling in from the UK to give us an update on that. Know that we do these sessions every first Thursday of the month. So that means that next session is beginning of February, but that one won't take place because instead we have our CPX 360. And for those that don't know, we have Hikaru Sulu joining us from the final frontier, I guess. And he will join us for CPX 360. So I hope everyone is registered for this event. Looking forward to it. Everything that's new that we're going to do this year within Checkpoint will be announced. So interesting to see what's coming. But then that means that the first session of Checkmates Live Belux will be in March the 2nd. And it will be from IRT. So for those that remember, we had a session with Tom and Tom from the IRT team last month. And so we're doing a deep dive into something we haven't decided what yet, some deep dive on best practices of how to secure certain things, how to best handle, for example, Active Directory, etc. But that brings us to today's session in January, and that will be our Maestro update. And for that, I give the word to Tom. Tom, you can start sharing and do your thing.
I will. Thank you very much, sir. Good morning, everybody. Hope you're all well and again having a nice, or you've had a nice break and a nice new year. Let me share my screen.
And while he starts sharing, some housekeeping rules. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A. If you just want to chit chat, use the chat. But if you have specific questions, we do it in the Q&A. I'll try to answer them during the session, or at the least, at the end of the session, we'll go over all of the questions and have a Q&A section. So Tom, it's yours.
Cool. So hopefully you can see my screen. So as we said, the topic for the day is a little update on what we have done in Maestro over recent version, and also what we're planning to do. So we'll try and cover both a little bit of history, a little bit of the current, and a little bit of the future. Again, maybe looking towards the stars as was discussed a few moments ago. So this is the agenda. I just a little bit of background on me. I've been at Checkpoint for over 11 years, most recently in the Maestro team for the past couple of years. But prior to that, I've generally worked in either the UK or within a overlay position. The goal here is, as we said, to give you a little bit of background and to show you a few of the features that you may not be aware of, or a couple of capabilities that you might not have seen, that hopefully we can try and let you know what's happened with them. Now, the main focus, I guess, in terms of 8110, I guess, is a Maestro version. I guess the big thing that many people were waiting for is improvements in terms of upgrades. So before we talk about the upgrade itself, it's worth just considering a little bit of the background. So kind of where did we come from? What maybe are some of the challenges and what are we looking to do? And I think that helps explain hopefully the direction you'll see us moving into in terms of Maestro. So in the Maestro world, there traditionally were two Maestro versions. Okay. Checkpoint had 8020 SP, and therefore we had that was a Maestro specific version of 8020, and Checkpoint had 8030 SP, and that was the if you will, the Maestro specific version of 8030. Okay, and this was really based on the type of appliance that you had. So if you had an appliance from the 2016 range, then they would generally run 8020. And if you had an appliance from the Quantum range, they would run 8030. Okay, so at that time, because Main Train didn't allow you to go from 8020 to 8030 or from 8030 back down to 8020, Maestro was the same. Yeah, Maestro kind of inherited what happened with the Main Train. So you either had an 8020 or an 8030 series of appliances within your Maestro group. We call them a security group. The orchestrator itself ran what was called 8020 SP. Okay, and it didn't really matter whether you had 8020 or 8030 SP appliances. It ran 8020 SP on the orchestrator. Now, again, this was a little bit confusing because actually when you looked at the software, it was actually a 3.1 kernel. It was kind of newer in terms of internal kernel, but we felt it was sort of safer just to say this is 8020 SP. This is the standard version that ran on our orchestrators. Okay, so we had that in terms of the background. Now, in terms of what changed, and this was a change that came about in 81, any of those appliances, so the 8020 and obviously 8020 SP or 8030 and 8030 SP devices, they could all run R81 or higher. Okay. What did this mean for Maestro? What did this mean for Maestro customers in general? Few things. Firstly, there was a unification of the, if you will, the SP code into our main train. Okay. Doesn't sound big, but let's kind of look into that a little bit more. Where this became really, really useful is in terms of things like sort of the size of the audience. If everyone's running the same code, it makes things a lot easier. It makes things easier to develop for. It makes things easier to QA and test and so on. It also makes jumbo hotfixes simpler and quicker. So historically, if we sort of refer back to the 8020 days, when we had an 8020 jumbo hotfix for main train, we might see 2 or 3 releases of that jumbo hotfix, and then Maestro would do a wrap up. They'd say, okay, the Maestro guys would say, let's, or the high-end guys say, let's take all of these different enhancements that we've had and fixes that we've had, and let's do a new jumbo hotfix for Maestro. So sometimes you were then held back a little bit. So you had either slightly older code, or you had a specific feature that you were given that only worked on a certain version. And again, that doesn't help you or the customer. Okay, so a huge positive step was made to try and merge all that code into 81. And obviously, over time, yes, there's a few gaps, and again, we'll discuss some of them today. But what we're trying to do is to have that alignment as much as we can between main train and the scalable platform. So there now is just one code train. Okay. The tricky thing that we saw with some customers who were looking to upgrade to R81 specifically was there wasn't really a quick and easy path. What you had to do was reinstall your appliances or reimage your appliances. And again, that kind of would give you an outage or a downtime. You might need spare appliances. You might need spare transceivers. Again, that wasn't ideal. Okay, so that's the background. Now, with the release of 8110, what changed? The key benefit that you saw was that you had the ability to do a CPU's upgrade of both your orchestrators and your appliances from the 8020, 8030, 81 versions up to 8110. Okay, so this meant it kind of opened up those updates to everybody. Now, there is a little gotcha, and again, we'll talk about it now. We'll talk about what we're going to do. The key thing here was, unlike previous updates to 81, we now could keep all of our security group settings, our policy, and so on. So it was great that it was just a case of a CPU's upgrade, and away we go. But there was one sort of mini gotcha, again, something we're going to address. At the point where you were failing over between your yet to be upgraded members and your upgraded members within the security group, those connections were not synced. Okay, so there would be a blip there. Now, we'll talk about what we're going to do in a capability that you might know from main train called multi-version cluster, which we should have in 8120. So in terms of possibility, what can we do today? One option is a sort of install from ISO, if you will, or install from USB stick, whatever you want to call it. But that, if you're talking about the orchestrator specifically, that does need TAC, because you need the BIOS password for the orchestrator to do the official method to re-baseline your orchestrator on 8110. Okay, and that's quite useful for a number of customers. But for the wider community, it means that you can also do an upgrade of your orchestrator or your appliances through CPUs. Okay, again, just one sort of observation here is if you did revert your orchestrator or appliance, just be aware that it would revert back to the shipped version. So again, maybe if it was an 8030 SP appliance, it would go back to 8030. If it was an 8020 SP orchestrator, it would go back to 8020. So again, there's a discussion there on what's the best approach. In terms of upgrade, it's actually well documented, and we'll just briefly cover off what we're looking at in terms of that upgrade itself. I guess first thing to take into account is the first step is kind of high level, what are we trying to do? Well, firstly, we need to make sure we've got our orchestrators on a version of 8020 SP with the right jumbo that will allow us to do the update. Okay, with the update of the jumbo hotfix done, we can then do a CPU's upgrade and a DA upgrade of the orchestrator, which will give us now our orchestrators running 8110. Okay. Then in terms of our security group, our name for a group of appliances that are doing the same job, our security group of appliances we also want to bring up. And again, here's where you can see there's kind of three source versions: 8020 SP, 8030 SP, or 81. Okay, so depending on that version, again, at a high level, what you're trying to do is make sure that the devices have got the right jumbo hotfix and pre-upgrade hotfix on there, and make sure that that's ready. Make sure that they're running a CPU's deployment agent or DA that's capable of allowing the upgrade to take place. And obviously, also import and upgrade the group to 8110 using a CPU's package. Now, the way that we do that, or the way that we suggest to do that, and again, this kind of doesn't matter whether you're on one site, two sites. So just like in a cluster, you can upgrade one site first, then upgrade the other. But generally, what we say is, in any site, split that group into two. So let's say you have a security group of 6 appliances. Split them into a group A and a group B. Okay, and during the upgrade, what we do is we say, okay, let's take the group B devices. Let's bring those devices down so we know that we're running only on group B. We'll install the upgrade package, we'll let them reboot, and then we added a utility called SP upgrade, which is a script that guides you through the steps of doing the update on those members, on the group A members. When that script is run and the devices are updated and ready to go, they're kind of ready to take over, you go onto your management server, you change the version of your security group, for example, in Smart Console. And then, assuming we're not using VSX, for example, you do a policy push to your devices. And what's happening here is, because we've said our version is 8110, obviously the updated policy, if you will go onto that group A group, and they will then have the 8110 version of your policy. Okay, so they're then ready to go. What we can then do is jump back to the group, and we can say, now we're going to switch from running the traffic from the group B appliances to the group A appliances. Repeat those steps on group B appliances, so appliance 4, 5, and 6. Again, let them be updated, using the script again. And then once you're done and all of your devices are now running the same software version, we can just go into the console, do an install policy, and do any checks you wish. Okay, so at a high level, that's what it is that we've done. Okay. Now, in terms of new features and capabilities, one of the things that was added was what was sort of internally called mix and match, or what we called mixed appliances. Now, to give a little bit of background again here, remember that there may be customers that are running slightly older appliances that do support Maestro. Okay, so most of our appliances with 10 gig and higher, again, as from the ranges we discussed, they'll run Maestro if you wish. Now, as time progresses, and maybe you want to start to add in new appliances and maybe retire some of the old ones, the mixed appliances feature allowed us to combine the traditional appliance with the one that was going to replace it within the same security group. Okay, so I could have, as we can see, different appliances of a different hardware type running in the same group. And again, from the article here, you'll see tables like this. Okay, so for example, if I have a 7000, I can decide, or I can get an indication of which appliances are likely to be supported. Okay, now in terms of the sort of the ticks and the exclamation marks here, tick is something we support. The exclamation mark is something that we don't think there'll be an issue with, but again, please just raise a ticket to make sure that it's okay. And if you don't see a combination, then assume it's not supported. And why might something not be supported? Well, as an example, if we have a group of very small appliances, And then we introduced a really powerful appliances with, let's say 70 something cores and 128 gig of RAM, but our existing group is relatively low powered in comparison, then if that very big appliance gets restarted, there's going to be quite an impact on those remaining devices. So where there are extremes of resource, and that can be sort of memory, cores, or whatever it might be, then generally we wouldn't advise those kind of combinations and therefore not support them. Okay. Now there is, again, just a couple of notes here. There is a capability called auto clone or SMO image cloning. The auto clone feature is something that we use that says if I had, let's say, 4 appliances that were of the 7000 model and I was going to add another one into the same group, but I'd already installed a jumbo hotfix onto my security group, then the auto clone feature would make sure that that new device not only would have got the same configuration, settings, and so on, which again happens automatically, but it would also make sure that the jumbo hotfix changes were also applied. Okay. Now, if you're using the mixed appliances feature, then that isn't something that you should have turned on. Okay, you can absolutely mix the appliances, that's fine. You could add the new device into the group, that's fine with the auto clone turned off. All you would do is manually install the jumbo hotfix on that new device once that device is kind of up and ready to go. Okay, so that's the mixed appliances feature. We have a couple of features which we've kind of called early availability. Now, again, don't think early availability in terms of EA code of Checkpoint that's not generally available. Think of it as number of customers deployed. Okay, what we're trying to do with our capabilities is to say we've written things for certain customers often. Okay. And as time goes on, we will introduce those into main train, but often they might get used by that specific group and maybe nobody more, unless we kind of share that these capabilities are available. So what these next couple of features are all about are features that are in the code, but we want to kind of grow over time that enough people are using them to say, yep, in the next version, we will kind of more verbosely announce these as capabilities. So one of those is shared uplinks. And again, to give you a little bit of background, it was decided quite early on in Maestro that for security reasons, we did not want to share the uplinks between security groups. So what's an uplink? An uplink is a connection to the outside world from the orchestrator. That link, it was decided, should only be given to one security group of appliances doing a job. Why? Well, if someone tried to denial of service attack group number 1, we didn't want there to be an impact on group number 2. Okay, so if they had physically separate appliances, by having physically separate uplink connections, then one should not impact the other. Of course, there was actually some customers that said, yeah, we would like to share these uplinks. We're using them in specific areas of our network where we would like a bond, for example, to be available to group number 1 and group number 2. So they could both use those same uplink interfaces in terms of physical connectivity. Now, in terms of things you need to be aware of, just again, there's a couple of notes. It does introduce a couple of relationships between the security groups. Okay, so as an example, if I've got security group number 1 and security group number 2, and they're both using the shared uplinks feature and they've got a shared bond, if I add or remove a slave interface from the bond in group 1, I need to add or remove the slave interface in the bond in group number 2. Okay, so I need to keep that consistency, and that is because it's the security group with the lowest ID that's handling the LACP conversations between the customer switches, okay, and Maestro. So obviously we don't want group 1 and group 2 and group 3 and group 4 all sharing the same shared uplinks, but then all of those groups all trying to have a conversation with the customer switches about the same shared interfaces. So that's why that's the case. So it does introduce a bit of a relationship there. We also added a feature called same VMAX. So again, for those customers that are users of ACI, so Cisco's ACI, this could be quite helpful to those. In terms of where it's used, it's often used in dual site setups, so it's particular for dual site setups. And why does this matter? Okay, so let's look at this example here. When we have the same VMAX feature turned off, between site 1 and site 1's orchestrators and site 2 and site 2's orchestrators, the MAC address of a particular interface on the orchestrator is different. So you can see here, 8.1 and A1, that's the difference between the two. So again, when traffic comes to the security group, it will be going to the 8.1, and when it comes from the security group, it will be coming from the 8.1 address on site 1, but on site 2, it's different. It's A1 and A1, okay, for the to and from. What we were able to do is in this particular software update is we now have the capability to have, if you will, a virtual MAC, VMAC, that is the same regardless of which site you are on. So again, the physical MACs might be, and obviously will be, different between site 1 and site 2 interfaces on the particular orchestrators. But traffic to and from that particular location, that particular interface, that will use the same MAC. Okay, now obviously the world is never perfect, and this did introduce an additional challenge. So we'll try and explain a little bit of what we've also tried to do. There are going to be times where you are running things like NTP or other services, okay, where the sort of the passive site or the site that may not be live may want to do updates, to do some checks, to communicate with something, okay? And if you're now in a situation where devices both at site 1 and at site 2 are communicating out with the same MAC address and same IP address in 2 places at the same time, that could confuse your switches. So there is also, again, and you'll find it in the SK, a feature which is called hide local connections from standby site behind the SMO. The SMO is the single management object. Okay, so what this is saying is, if I've got site 1 and I've got site 2, and site 1 is currently where my SMO lives because that's my live site. If site 2 devices want to do some sort of update, I will ask them to kind of go across the site, the inter-site links between the orchestrators, and I will make their traffic pop out of the SMO at site 1. Okay, so again, that was also done often in kind of the Cisco world to help on the networking side to make sure nobody gets confused. There was a huge alignment, I guess is the right word, but a huge alignment in terms of VPN, and this was in 8110 and also in 81 Jumbo Hotfix 34, if I recall. In terms of trying to make sure that, again, some of the gaps that we had in Maestro compared to standard gateway were also addressed. So again, VTI support, really, really useful. Route-based VPN, tunnel management, link selection, quite a lot of capabilities that, again, people may have been a little bit apprehensive about moving to Maestro for if they didn't have that sort of feature parity, especially as they start to adopt cloud services where, again, things like sort of route-based VPNs or VTIs at least are quite commonly used. Okay, so you saw that alignment kind of written for 8110, but also backported into the 81 jumbo hotfix as well. Obviously, and again, we kind of shouldn't forget that the orchestrators were also updated. So this meant that, again, if you're trying to do certain capabilities like, let's say, shared uplinks, okay, by having that orchestrator on 8110, again, it was just that bit fresher, that bit newer, and again, you had the alignment in terms of not having to have loads and loads of different versions running all over the place. Okay, you can also, again, and just as a quick reminder for those that don't know, our 81 management can also manage 8110. Again, just a general observation, as long as you're running Jumbo 42, I think is the specific version there. So again, in general terms, you want to try and keep your management and gateway version the same. But again, you can kind of go older once the Jumbos do allow you that support. Quas blade support was also added. Okay, so again, something that was missing historically, that's been added back in. So you've got Quas on the Maestro platform as well, if you wish. Again, arguably with Maestro, you've probably got 10 or 40 or 100 gig links. So kind of the use of Quas was never seen as a massive challenge at that point. Now, in general, there was a couple of other things that are that have happened and will continue to happen in terms of VPN enhancements. Okay, so not all we can cover in the session today, but again, there's some other cool things coming in terms of VPN that hopefully you'll understand over time. Firstly, kind of outside of Maestro, there was a separation of the remote access and site-to-site VPN daemons. Okay, again, specifically written for 8110 and then backported into 81 Jumbo 34, as we said a moment ago. So again, this should give us the sort of the beginnings of better scale in terms of VPNs. Okay, so applies to normal code as well, but again, just something that's quite useful to know. The benefit that came for Maestro at the same time was a decision to say, let's split the appliance that does the encryption and decryption of the VPN traffic from the device or appliance that does the inspection of that traffic for nasties. Okay, so again, if you've got a good number of tunnels, good number of appliances, and so on, what you should find is, firstly, the orchestrator will calculate which appliance is going to receive the sort of the VPN tunnel, if you wish, because the orchestrator can only look at the outside IP addresses, so where it's coming from on the internet, where it's landing in terms of IP address of your security group. So that's what it's going to do its calculation based upon. But then, once the traffic has landed on that appliance and been decrypted, it can then do another calculation and say, well, where can I send the traffic to, so that the different technologies, the blades, the services that we run, where can that then be handled? Okay, so again, it spreads that traffic out a little bit better within the system. There was also, and again, I wasn't aware myself, but certain switch vendors were actually requiring a specific license to support Q in Q, and certain switch vendors also did not have the capability in their older switches to support Q in Q. Okay, so one of the things that we needed in a dual site Maestro install, i.e. data center 1, data center 2, and again, traffic might be you might be failing across between the different sites. We had to have, prior to 8110, a few specific requirements. So one was support of Q&Q, which is sort of VLAN tag inside VLAN tag for those that don't know. Another one was support for jumbo frames. Again, we could get around this if we needed to, but again, easier life was jumbo frame support. And obviously normal cluster Excel requirements, so 100 millisecond round trip time and no more than 5% packet loss. Now, in 8110, the connection between the customer switches, so again, whether this is 2 switches or 4 switches, doesn't really matter, but it is possible now on this link here. So here's our orchestrators, our appliances live below, but our orchestrators connect to our customer switch at site 1, and our orchestrators connect to our customer switch at site 2. Okay, the links between the switches that provide the connectivity between the orchestrators, it is possible now that you can not require support of Q&Q on these links. Okay, so again, if you need it, it's something we can help you out with if you do. Obviously, we released the MHO 175, and it was a little bit later than the 8110 GA, but we also ensure now that we've got support for 8110 on the MHO 175. So the MHO 175 was a replacement for the MHO 170. Okay, and the main difference, just to kind of highlight to everybody, is on the MHO 175 device, same for the 170, you can see we have these QSFP ports here, QSFP 28 ports, and in the MHO 175, if I put a splitter cable, so for those that don't know, for example, a fiber splitter cable, we can have a 40 gig transceiver inserted into one of these ports, and into that goes a fiber splitter cable that's got one 40 gig connection on one end, but then 4 10 gig connections on the other end. Okay, and that could be DAC, that could be transceiver and fiber cable, obviously. In the MHO 170, if I plugged a transceiver and a DAC, and either a DAC or fiber splitter into this top row here, it disabled the port at the bottom. In the MHO 175, I can, in theory, use the splitters anywhere I like. Okay, so if I want to use, if I want, for example, not 2 100 gig ports or 2 40 gig ports, but I would like 8 10 gig ports, I can now put a 40 gig transceiver into here, a 40 gig transceiver into here, fiber splitter. Okay, so I get 4 10 gigs here, 4 10 gigs here. Okay, and this was quite a benefit for customers that have got a lot of 10 gig in their network. They can now fully utilize all of those ports on the system. Okay, so again, Jumbo 14, I think it was, and higher is where that support was officially introduced. Okay, now we'll look at some of the future plans. First thing I'll say is usual checkpoint rules apply. Okay, in terms of what we're going to discuss here, until it's released, it's not released. Okay, and what we're going to talk about is things that are in plans, not necessarily, and I should say plans could change. Okay, so the key thing is if there's a specific feature that you definitely want to see, let us know. Okay, if there's a feature that we don't have, let us know. Okay, but key takeaway is these are what we are planning to do. It's not necessarily a guarantee. Okay, just to keep that clear to everybody. Firstly, there's going to be some feature alignment in terms of Maestro. Okay, now one of the first features is we're going to add in support for dynamic balancing. So dynamic balancing, and I know from some of the other Checkmate sessions that have been done, we kind of went through this already, but dynamic balancing allows us to change the number of sort of SNDs and workers on the fly, if you will. So what this means is if the workload in my security group changes from being maybe very, very traditional firewall focused to very, very deep inspection focused, historically I'd had to change the appliance to either be suiting one way, the other way, or somewhere in the middle. Dynamic balancing, which came into the main train, allowed that to change on the fly. Okay, so in 8120, there is a plan to try and make sure we get that dynamic balancing also supported in Maestro. It wasn't a massive priority, if you will, for Maestro, because remember the orchestrators did quite a lot of the balancing work for us based on IP addresses. Okay, so this is kind of another layer of tuning, of automatic tuning that's going to be coming in. Also, to get alignment in terms of the fast policy installation, some call it, or the accelerated access policy installation. So again, in main train, if you recall, if you weren't making very many changes, or if the changes you were making in your access control policy were quite simple, then it was possible for you to press a button and your policy install would just be a couple of seconds for the access control. Okay. This wasn't possible in Maestro, but again, this is something that we're looking to bring in as well. Key one, and again, I'll give you kind of my views on this. Firstly, it is my understanding that your best baseline for multi-version cluster support, aka connectivity upgrade, is an R81 dot something baseline. Okay, that's my best information I know at this moment. So if you had a very, very old version, the best thing I can say is at least get to 81 dot something. Okay. What this will allow us to do, we discussed earlier on about how we can go from 8020 or 8030 or 81 to 8110. And we know that our policy and configuration and so on is kept during that process. But as I mentioned, we don't have that stateful failover. The MVC or connectivity upgrade, this should give us that ability to have the stateful failover during that upgrade process. Okay, so really, really important key feature. We're going to bring global NAT into Maestro. So again, SK there for reference if you need it. But historically, what systems did was have kind of pools or groups of NAT ports, I should say, per core. And it was moved over to have a global NAT pool, if you will. Again, not to be confused with IP pool NAT. So again, that will be brought across and aligned over into Maestro. And another feature is management data plane separation. So for some customers and for some organizations, they like to have the management portion of the gateway and the data processing portion of the gateway as two kind of logical entities so that one doesn't impact the other. MDPS we do have on certain versions today, but it's not in every version, and it can be a little bit tricky when you're kind of doing replacements of files and so on, that you kind of have to sort of turn it off, do some changes, turn it back on, and so on. Okay. Again, what you're seeing here is our hopes for 8120. Again, just to give you an idea. And it should be that MDPS should be a standard feature in 8120. So if you are a user of that and you want to see the benefit of that, then you should have, shall we say, an easier life in terms of subsequent updates. Other things that we are also hoping to do is a capability called Autoscale. Okay, so again, we are hoping that automatically, based on thresholds that you set, you can scale up or adjust your security groups. Okay, where can this be helpful? Let's say I've got a couple of security groups, and one is used for my day-to-day remote access, and one group is used for another business unit. Okay, I get to the end of my tax year, and I now need to say, well, actually, because this is so important, I'm going to have more people maybe working from the office, and I need to make sure that my my sort of tax team get all of their work done. So I want to give these guys a spare appliance. Then again, for whatever reason, there's a massive change to working from home. So your government rules change, as I'm sure is happening all over the place, as here in the UK. It might be then that the load automatically spikes on my remote access group. Okay, with Autoscale, it can automatically, based on these thresholds, move devices around for you between the security groups. We're also hoping to add a feature called fast acceleration. So this is something that's been around for a little while internally, and there's kind of two versions which we'll see. Fast acceleration should allow us to, firstly, from the smart console, add rules into the smart console that are in effect translated to rules directly onto our orchestrators. Okay, so kind of some rules directly on the orchestrators. Where's this helpful? Say you're a customer that's using Maestro and you've got 100 gig backup that runs every night, and there's no way that anyone cares about the VMware backup going from A to B and what might be inside, because nobody's got enough RAM to hold it, to even look at it, to do anything with it, and the file is a format that nobody truly understands. Okay, that traffic can be fast accelerated, or plans to be fast accelerated directly across the orchestrator ports. In parallel, there's another feature called HFT, or high frequency trading, similar to fast acceleration, but in this system, the traffic is passed between the ports, as we said in the fast acceleration, but also the traffic is also copied to the security group. And it might be that something appears a little bit later on that we still then want to reset or reject, but not quite as in real time. Okay, so again, high frequency trading floors or low latency customers, quite useful. There's some other stuff that's also coming again, which we're not allowed to discuss just at the moment, but again, kind of keep your ear to the ground. You should see some new features that we're going to announce and new capabilities that we'll announce as well. Now, just to wrap up, recommended versions. Often we get asked, which version do we recommend? And like with many of these things, there's not always a simple or quick answer. Okay, it may well be that the answer firstly is to go and check the known limitations and go and check the feature comparison charts. Okay, this should try and help you understand what is likely to be supported or is supported in a version. However, if it's a POC or a demo, then actually 8110 in terms of features and capabilities is a very strong contender. If we're talking about production, again, we've got two choices. Now, if the customer is very, very cautious and very, very sensitive, then an R80.X, so an 8020 or an 8030 SP version may be their preference because it has been around longer. Okay. But keep in mind, as I said earlier on, in terms of jumbo hotfix, in terms of life of the version and so on, while it's been around longer, in terms of how it gets updates and new features and so on, it's going to be delayed. So for our team, obviously the official checkpoint version of recommended today is 81, but I'm hearing sort of rumors that this is relatively soon going to get changed to 8110, hopefully. So really our team, in terms of capabilities, in terms of updates, especially when it comes to Maestro, probably 8110 is actually a very, very good version to have a real good think about and really consider that as a version to go for. Okay, so in terms of kind of wrapping up, obviously we've seen where we were, we saw how we've now unified all of the code, and really how Maestro is a key sort of platform both for Checkpoint and customers and partners alike. It gives us the wonderful scale and availability that obviously many customers are looking at, and also with still so much confusion around on how big things will be, what the sort of growth is going to be like, what changes might be coming. The ability to kind of buy what you need now and scale is a really, really popular thing. But hopefully you can also see as well here, there's a huge amount of development and plans that are going on with the Maestro platform. And again, in terms of announcements, there is 8120 early availability software that has been announced. So again, if you do need anything on that side, do reach out to us. We will try and help out. Okay, so guys, thank you all for listening. Kristof, anything to wrap up? Any questions and so on?
Not at the moment. I'm well, the Q&A has been open, so if you do have any questions for Tom, the time is now. Meanwhile, thank you, Tom, for the update. It was quite in detail, so thank you. I know that the tech guys do appreciate it. So let's just wait a few minutes for the update, and then meanwhile I'll switch back to. No, that's not right. Yeah, share. Thank you. As you are the host of this endeavor. Yeah, this is the one. So, well, you must have been very thorough, because I'm not getting any questions. Neither do we get anything in the chat. So, like, no open questions on Maestro. Yeah, I can tell you that the interest in Maestro also in our local market has increased a lot. So, yeah, it's now with our 81.10, it's ready and ready for the big leagues, and I feel we've already have at least one customer I know of that upgraded to our 81.10, and it's running good. Okay, we have something in the chat. Oh, that's just a thank you. Yeah, that's just our local team. Okay, and then thank you, Raf. So Raf is looking forward to test run Maestro, so that's good. All right, then while if there's no more questions, then just let me wrap up. First of all, reminding you of CPX 360. So if you haven't registered already, please do. The registrations are open. And then not to forget that we have our IRT session after that. So put it in your calendar. I don't know if it's actually March the 2nd. Is that correct? Is that a Thursday? Check. Just to make sure I'm not bullshitting anyone. January, February, March. Oh, no, it's actually the 3rd, March the 3rd. So it's March the 3rd. And then rest me to thank all of you for participating, and also Tom, thank you for joining us today and giving our monthly call or monthly session a lot of good content. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you everybody for joining.
All right, thank you everyone, and then I guess we can stop recording. and then say goodbye to everyone, and see you guys next time.